Today I'm going to talk about Crossgen Comics. It's a brand that started in the late 90s. Company had a bit of a Star Wars vibe to it. There was the sigil here, the basically in lieu of the Force in Star Wars. This is basically the source of the otherworldly powers for the characters and the things that made them special, made them like Sith or Jedi types. This brand would appear and it would be a sign that they had a destiny and they had abilities. This book in particular, the first, kind of like their take on the Greek gods and the source of this sort of yin-yang symbol, the sigil that give them their powers. And these books I read sporadically nearly 2 decades ago. A lot of them were wrecked during the flood about 5 years ago in my room, so I did recover one series from a convention, Brath, the Chuck Dixon's take on Conan that was done for this. So in lieu of that, I am whipping up the fanzines that were on a high shelf and avoided getting wrecked. We have Mark Alessi and the Crossgen staff casting who they think would be good choices for the Crossgen movie. So that's pretty cool. That's like the entire company coming together and saying, yeah, if they made a movie current year, here's who we think would be cool for it, do a good job. And I believe the major players at Crossgen, if I recall correctly, for writers, it was Mark Waid of Kingdom Come fame, and also of tortious interference lawsuit fame. That we'll wait and see how that goes. It seems pretty clear cut from my end, but we will see on that. Not exactly a legal expert, so we'll see how that goes. So we had Mark Waid. We had Ron Mars, who was notable for replacing Green Lantern Hal Jordan with Kyle Rayner. And he did a pretty well a similar arc in Witchblade about a decade down the line. And it's a thing where having a very limited grasp on a lot of Ron Mars stuff, he kind of comes off as a one-trick pony. Maybe he's like a 2-trick or 3-trick pony, but it seems like he has 1 or 2 main tricks up his sleeve, and that's what he carries himself on. That's what gets him by. Barbara Kessel was one of the other major architects of this line. She did a series with this character Sephi, Meridian. That was actually my favorite out of the 4 initial titles. Barbara Kessel was someone who did take a stand against sexism in the comic industry. She was an advocate for that, of making sure there was a even playing field. And of course, I believe there was a Dark Horse editor about 4 or 5 years ago where it came to light that they were into like sexually harassing people, and it was a well-kept secret in the industry until someone exposed it. I believe Janelle Aslan wrote a lengthy article on that, where when people write these articles, it's almost like they're trying to outdo Chris Claremont for word count, like for Claremont's entire run sometimes, where it's like, you're not Tolstoy, it's a news article, it's not a novella. I'm not going to flip open my tablet and read like a 50,000 word freaking essay on this one person that's insanely padded. Like, I'm serious, she wrote a massive article. I think I read like maybe a third of it. I don't know, it's just like the scroll bar just was never ending. It was like a bottomless scroll bar. It was insane. And remember Vox Day was interviewed by Bleeding Cool 4 months ago, and that was deleted, I think, on the same day, but it got archived, because of course it did, because that's juicy, that they basically ran away from impartial journalism and kind of tucked their tails between their legs when a few people noticed they were interviewing this, what I would say is mildly controversial figure, Vox Day, and I'm saying this as myself, and I tend to have a monotone most of my videos. Vox Day is a very dull person when interviewed. I watched him on Ethan Van Sciver's channel a while back, and he had a bit of a unearned sense of accomplishment about himself, where he was talking himself up as being better than Neil Gaiman as a writer, where it's like, I don't see that, and Neil Gaiman hasn't always hit home runs with his work, but no. But the thing with Vox Day is, like, he has kind of that douchey sense of self-importance, and where he thinks he's very grandiose and smarter and more magnificent than he is. I don't even know if magnificent is a word I would necessarily use to describe him in pretty well any context, but that is something where I think he kind of sees himself that way, and I don't think a lot of other people do. This video isn't to tear down Vox Day, because it's like, who gives a shit? He's someone I find very uninteresting. But the point that I got off track of was news articles being bloated, and yeah. So, got this thing where they're the three main writer architects this series I mentioned: Barbara Kessel, Mark Waid, Ron Mars. Hope I'm not leaving anybody out here. We got their choices for the I believe there were just 4 series at this point. Is there another page? No, there's not. Okay. So this was the Chuck Dixon. That was another big writer for Crossgen. He definitely deserves to be counted. He wrote a lot of Batman stuff that people like. Created Bane. So, like, what if Val Kilmer played Samurai? Samurai is kind of a character that's kind of in the vein of Cable. He's kind of like that straight-laced soldier that's seen a lot of wars. I would say he's as much like Malcolm Reynolds from Firefly, but he looks more like Cable, but I think he's a little closer to Malcolm Reynolds from Firefly. And they were thinking Val Kilmer, and this time that's actually not a bad choice. His sigil, you can't see it, it's on his chest at that point, and he was facing off against these very vicious-looking lizard-type creatures, kind of look like Klingons, if Klingons were lizard people. They're called Saurians. They're basically Alex Jones's worst nightmare. This is Giselle from Mystic. That was, I believe, the only title out of the initial run that I never read any issues of. And I kind of read a basic description a few days ago when I was prepping for this video, and yeah, it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be based off the description. Like, I was expecting, like, kind of like Harlequin romance. Like, remember there was an ad with her and some dude named Darrow, and it kind of seemed like a cat and mouse game with the romance, the back and forth, and it's like, oh, she's Sailor Moon, and he's the Tuxedo Mask of it. He's the guy who's maybe good guy Greg, maybe he's the incorrigible Kerr, who knows? But it seemed more like it was about her and her sister from the description I read, and there was a coven of sorcerers that were kind of playing games with them. That the idea with her is that her sister worked for a lot of the mystical power, and then she gets a sigil, and then she just has a lot of that natural power, natural talent, without having to work for it, so it kind of creates a divide. That's the impression I got from synopsis I read. Anyone who's a Crossgen fan can sort me out, tell me different. This character is also from the main book Sigil, with the Cable-type character Sam Ray. And focus font. Okay, this is freaking annoying. There we go. Yeah, that is a beautiful image. Love that image. Wish I knew who the artist was. I believe, I recall that Jim Chung, the creator of the Young Avengers characters, along with Alan Heinberg, Jim Chung was the artist on one of these books, but it was Scion. Maybe he was doing double duty or switching back and forth. I don't know. Sephi, again, was my favorite, started my favorite book in this line from the initial launch. Julia Stiles does resemble her and would have been on the right age. Sephi, I believe, wasn't even really a teen. I believe she was a tween. She was like, about 12, 13, at least that's the way they drew her. 14 at most. Very young looking 14, not like a hard 14. Like people can be a hard 40 or a hard 30, or they really look that age. She looked very young for a lead. Kind of like a proto Miles Morales in that way, of the atypically young lead in the comic book series. And her story was basically Hamlet. Oh, they even say Hamlet here. That is fitting. And of course, her Uncle Claudius here is Ilan. Ilan had this, I believe this black lady with a close shaved head. I believe she either got a sigil or straight off, or she eventually got one. She was kind of like his apprentice, the Darth Maul to his Sidious, again with the Star Wars references. Ashley Lay is the star, not the star, the co-star of Scion. She is the love interest. It's also the action girl, and she kind of looks like she belongs in Thundercats. Like, adds a little bit of striping, some cat ears. Looks straight out of Thundercats. Remember the issue I read of Scion, the main character fighting with this big freaking creature with a sword? Very cool. Here's Ethan. He is the main lead in Scion. I can't even remember if he had a sigil or not. Like, Crossgen kept guessing on what happened. And I believe this is Roya Sinter. Oh, this character from Sigil? I guess so. Got Braun here. He's basically Ethan's nemesis, war-torn soldier. And out of this, they also did a few things. They did the Conan-inspired series Wrath. A big one that got a lot of people's attention was Ruse, which was basically Mark Waid writing a Sherlock Holmes-type book in this mythical world. And a lot of these series occurred across different planets. Some of them were high-tech sci-fi, some of them were more mythical, looked like they were Game of Thrones or something. So it's a cool little mix where you could kind of do all genres, and it's planet, it's genre planet, it's planet genre. Planet sci-fi, planet fantasy, planet Conan, planet Sherlock. And they also did, it's called Sojourn. Yeah, they did Sojourn. That was early Greg Land stuff. Greg Land is, of course, notorious for tracing porn stars and passing it off as original artwork. Apparently for that one he was using reference very sparingly and doing a lot of his own stuff, and apparently a lot of it came off quite well. And outside of that, there was also the negation story, which involved Atlantis and a lot of basically band of misfits being woken from cryosleep, and you have to deal with the negation and creatures that want to destroy stuff. There was a lot of cool concepts out of this, and if there was like ever a comic book library, like a library that had memorabilia from comics, like how there's Archie Bunker's chair and Fonz's jacket in the film museum, Crossgen basically did money for their line. Like they did Crossgen brand money. It was money you could spend. It was kind of like a memorabilia thing, commemorative thing, and they ever did like a comic book museum where you had like a lot of memorabilia from different eras. That's something where I feel like it would belong there, along with the unsellable throw a stone, hit an issue on a stand books from the last 2 years, or the Stanley Drug issue that didn't have the comics code, the issue of Daredevil where Elektra died. There's a bunch of stuff like that, and I think Crossgen did enough that really earned a mention and earned its place in comic history, and really should not be forgotten. Marvel, of course, bought up the rights to this. Apparently, they continued Mark Waid's Ruse book, and briefly, and they did a version of Mystic that had nothing to do with the original, with a completely different writer. I believe it was G. Willow Wilson, which sometimes she tries and will do something that's passable, and sometimes she is just really phoning it in, and people say she's just notable anyway, even when it's not being proven. So yeah, and then that really weak attempt at reviving Crossgen just kind of like faded. I believe that was about a decade ago. I think that was around 2007, 2008. Might have been around 2009. That attempt just kind of faded, and there's a thing where Marvel will buy properties, and it's like they don't know how to manage their property they bought. They don't know what to do with it. Like I think I said in my last video, you can see that with Angela, Queen of Hell, where they bought the Spawn character off its actual creator, Neil Gaiman. And you can see that with the Malibu stuff, where there's shady contract stuff, and they don't know what to do with it. And it's just a thing of like, Marvel really needs to put up or shut up with these franchises they buy. They either need to work it and actually give the fans bang for the buck, or they need to just step off and maybe outsource it to something like IDW. I believe IDW is printing actual Marvel characters under their own banner. I guess you would call it Marvel being cucked. The internet term cucked. Internet version of that. They can't handle their business, so they're outsourcing it to a company that's doing even worse than them, expecting a better return. Which sounds kind of insane, but who knows, maybe this insane gamble will pay off moderately, who knows. But yeah, the overall point was, there's a lot of potential here. This line, due to mismanagement, was cut tragically short, so a lot of people didn't get the grand finale to a lot of these stories. And the overall arching story of the universe that was built here. But there's a lot that could be done with this series, and if Marvel wanted to like just outsource this series to, I don't know, Boom, or what's another one, I think a revival of this would need better art than Dynamite can provide, but yeah, maybe Boom, maybe they got it over at what is a good one? We got Boom, we got Dynamite, we got yeah, I'm really blanking. IDW used to have quality books that came out, but they lost a lot of their licenses and made some really bad business decisions. So I don't know. Anyway, overall point is, before I run out of storage space here, is that this is a brand that deserves another shot, deserves another go. Maybe a film, an actual film adaptation, not just fan casting from the creators. Would be a nice thing for people. It'd be a cool thing to see this universe pop up again. Thank you for your time.